Welcome back. This is another one of my antique vintage junk journals that I am posting on my Etsy shop. The link to my Etsy shop is below. It's basically go to Etsy and search for Hyper Stamper with a capital H. I know, capital H has to be there. So here is this lovely cover of this book I made using a vintage linen hanky, vintage doily pieces, and up here is just some newer lace and cheesecloth. And the back of the book is just a plain black cover. But here, inside this wonderful pocket, this is also a linen hanky, is this wonderful photograph. And I did some research on it, and it looks to be from the early 1900s. It's, we believe it's Austrian. But look at this fabulous image of this. Look at the bow. Good Lord, it's just fantastic. So that's tucked into the front. And then I made this tag out of a very old book page with a lovely image that I thought matched this lovely woman. And of course, my signature textured book binding innards with the netting there. And you can journal on the back of that if you wish. And this wonderful card, bingo card, like it's super thick, and you can see this is a serious bingo game. From the back it looks like one of the board game pieces, but I was able to acquire 10 of these, so I'm kind of hoarding them. But this one is so beautiful, it's going right on the cover, and that is from either the 40s or 50s. There was different opinions on that online. So let's take a little journey through this wonderful, wonderful journal. And remember, everything in here, except for the tea-dye pages, there's 4 full ones folded in half. Everything else is authentic vintage and antique paper. I don't use any commercial papers or replicas or fakes. So in this pocket here, we have a vintage dictionary, and I made this wonderful journaling tag out of a children's book page. A little pillow fight image there, which is sweet, with a bunny and a raccoon. Look at this from McCall's magazine from the 50s. Look at that awesome TV. They're just so, they just screams 1950s, these little wonderful images. This page here that I've turned into a double pocket page, it flips over onto the other side of this signature, is from the late 1800s. And when I was going through an antique gardening book, I found a few pressed pansies. Look at that. So I put it inside this window here under acetate so that can live with the book. I hand stamped a few little images on my tea-dyed paper just to make them more beautiful. This image here came from a vintage North American bird book. And because I'm Canadian, I kind of like this one. It's the Canada geese. Even though they are annoying, they are super lovely birds. You should learn about them. They mate for life and mourn the death of their mates when they pass. And it's really quite a wonderful story about them. I've got a vintage stamp here, and I've got a full vintage hanky here. It has never been used, so you can use that in your projects or just keep it because it's sweet and lovely. Another wonderful image from McCall's Needlework and Crafts magazine from the 50s. I put in this little journaling envelope. You can journal inside there. And it is attached to this wonderful recipe page, also from the 40s, 50s. This is an early 1900s book page. A little brittle, so I didn't do too much with it. It's just beautiful. And you can read up on the Hardy Norseman online. It's really an interesting story. I tucked in here some vintage stamps from England, or Europe, I think it's England, and a little journaling spot. And on the back side of this 1930s music paper is more space to journal. And I made the pocket out of a page from The Secret Garden, which is a classic. I actually read that whole book because I wanted to honor the book before I took the pages out. And all of this is mounted onto this vintage dictionary page. And I've got this lovely doily in here. And I made this little tuck spot pocket here out of a tiny dictionary page, and I added some vintage pattern tissue to it and just some little embellishments here. And behind it I tucked in some vintage 1950s pearls shop in Cincinnati receipts, so you can journal on those. I have these in all my journals. I love those so much. I'll be sad when I run out of them. Here is a page from a gardening book from the 50s. And here is another side of that doily that I turned into a pocket. And I made a little mini notebook here, just out of my scraps, but they're awfully fun. A little more journaling space for you. And let's see. Oh, this is kind of fun. I found this really old vintage card and I turned it into a little journaling spot for you. And it just lays right into this vellum belly band here. That's the other side of that wonderful recipe book. Again, a 1930s music sheet, just some wonderful scraps here. And this is a page out of a 1950s theater arts magazine. And it's the full page spread. It's really quite wonderful. And it's just a little piece of history for anybody who's interested in the theater. Isn't this fun? Decoupage. That's all the rage now, but it was also in the I want to say 60s or 70s when this little craft book came out. This is a 1930s school book page. And this is another craft magazine, do-it-yourself image. Isn't that fun? A little decoupage project here. And I made this little tuck spot out of that antique book page. And this is actually, you can't tell, but it's a vintage scorecard from a game. I think it was a vintage Yahtzee game. Some vintage crochet there, and you can journal on that. And this is an early 1920s postcard from the Congressional Library in Washington, D.C. And you can do whatever you like with that. It's a beautiful piece. And here's a full page image from a beautiful little children's book. How sweet is that? Two little kids going through the forest. And, yep, I'm jumping ahead here. Two more vintage stamps from the 1965, sorry, a very young Queen Elizabeth there. And we have here, it was funny, my kids thought this was a different language, but it's actually shorthand. So for those of us old enough to know what shorthand is, that's from a shorthand school book. And this is, oh, I love this image of the wooden ducks, decoys, and another very old music page. And there's another 1950s bingo card. So one in the front pocket on the cover, and this one tucked in here. You can journal on the back, reuse that. And I mounted that onto a journaling card here. And then you can see I've done that on top of a sewing pattern instruction sheet that was inside the pattern envelope. Another wonderful craft magazine page from the 50s. And I love this. This is a page from a French almanac from 1936. It's actually from Saturday the 21st, samedi 21 mars 1936. And to my French friends, I am so sorry if I didn't say that properly. My French isn't what it used to be, but it's just wonderful because you have to remember this is just at the peak of, or during World War II. So some of the stories in here are wonderful, and you can Google translate them if you want to find out a little more about them and their satire. And then these are the flip sides of those pages you saw from the patterns. And then we ended off with another one of these wonderful pages from 1920s book. So I hope you will visit my Etsy page. This is a real steal, this one. It's a beautiful journal, and I hope it goes to a wonderful new home. Thanks for visiting.